Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Late Night with the Borg here to recap the UNI game, the absolute paddling that was given. But first, we would like to thank our title sponsors, Kubota Dealers of South Dakota, as well as our show sponsor of Jackrabbit Central in downtown Brookings, and of course the bookstore on campus, and as well as the stadium store. Jackrabbit Central has all your Jackrabbit gear you may ever need. And of course, Kubota Dealers of South Dakota have the most reliable equipment, sales, parts, and service you may need around the state with 10 locations across the state of South Dakota. Get yourself into some orange equipment today. And Zach, you're a little choppy on my end, maybe not for the stream, but at least for me.
That's I may just move it around a little bit.
We got minor technical difficulties. It's my fault that we're late. I will take full blame for that. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's tough for you.
It ain't tough for me.
Oh, yeah, you sound like a robot. It's tough.
Oh, I do? No.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should. I don't know. I'll figure out. Did I put the headphones on the one time or?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a connection issue or
it could be a connection issue. I thought my mic was okay. I'll see if I maybe
it's in the name late
in my bag of tricks here. Bag of tricks for sure. Weren't really many bag of tricks needed in SDSU's game or a lot of games around the.
You might have to log out and log back in.
Okay.
I'm guessing we might have to try.
All right, I'll leave here and then come back in 1 second. That's it's interesting. I'm at the station. You think my connection would be pretty dang good here, but yep, I'll be right back.
So yeah, I am a little tired. I actually was doing a side project during the day here. Got people at the house. That's why I'm upstairs on the couch instead of the basement. We got company sleeping in the basement, but as always, we will soldier through and put this on for you guys. Sorry, keeping you guys up a little extra late by starting late. That's my bad. This game, I mean, went great. I don't think you can ever complain winning 41-3 at the UNI Dome. You win 2 games with a total score of 82-3 on the road. I mean, that's never anything to sneeze at. The passing game looked better. The defense was out of their mind this game. Turnovers and I think 5 turnovers this game. The blocked punt on top of it, which I would count as a turnover as well. I mean, the offense didn't really have to try to travel the length of the field very often. They scored when they should have. You got to have the backups come in for a quarter. That was awesome. I mean, the defense, Jordan Thal says the defense is so crazy good. It was fantastic today. DePriest, I guess he sounded fine. Everybody else, maybe it's my fault. I don't know. Ryan says he sounds fine after I made him log off. What a dick. It's my fault.
I just came on right as you said. The guy said I sounded fine.
I just noticed that. I don't know. I couldn't hear a word you were saying. It sounded crazy. But
there's some who would argue it would be for the best if you didn't hear a word. People didn't hear a word I was saying.
Yeah, everybody said you sounded fine. It was my fault. I don't know. I couldn't hear a word you said.
Mid-season. We're hitting. It may be mid-season, but we're just getting in mid-season form. So.
Well, yeah, you have the 11:30 show. It can't, if it goes smooth all the time. I don't even know if what we're worth logging in for then.
Yeah, exactly. So I just got off doing 2 shows at 10. So
yeah,
still working on posting those SDSU highlights. So we'll have those up here pretty soon. Hopefully, I can get that link out to everybody pretty quick. But needless to say, that was my request of kind of all the teams on the road this week is that they score a lot of points early, since I can't guarantee it. You never know how long people are going to be at the game, and they were. I got that and then some from SDSU and USD, so I was not. Wasn't one of those days where somebody only scored 10 points in the first half, and then I'm wondering what the hell I'm going to show.
Right.
Pretty good. So, but yeah, I think like I said, I was kind of saying this the whole non-conference that. How much can we really judge the non-conference? Because the real stuff starts in the Valley, and we've seen that over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and Chris Howard says any critiques would be nitpicking, and I mean, he's dead on with that. This game went exactly how you would hope it would. I wouldn't say necessarily that it's like a barometer nationally that I would look at and say, I look at that score and then say, oh, this vaults them over anybody. But that's what you want to see. It's what you needed to see out of the number one team on the road against a UNI team that has had some struggles this year so far. Did exactly what they were supposed to do. The defense was just unconscious. Jared DePriest had a day. I mean, I think he had 6 tackles, TFL, forced fumble. I mean, he was all over the field. We had, Mark looked a lot better. The passing game looked a lot better. I think you give it another 3-4 games, that baby's going to be humming along as well. And to me, you get Angel Johnson back, and he
That's
pops
huge.
off for a big day. I mean, the amount of talent in that room is just sick. It's just, it is. I mean,
your feature back, Amar Johnson, only had 40 yards, and doesn't matter. Like everybody else just was, that's as deep and balanced a performance, I think, as you're going to see from a team. And, like you said, Northern Iowa, this is, credit to the Jacks. This is not, we'll see what Northern Iowa does next week because they go down to Vermillion for D-Days. I'm not too optimistic on that for them. But, sometimes they've had some late season rallies, so maybe something happens here. They're still only 2-3, so you're still in the race technically for a playoff bid. But it's just, man, they are not. It's sad to see how far that program has sunk from when SDSU and NDSU came into this conference. They were kind of the standard, and they have just, I know there's been a lot of stories from Farley and whatnot. It's just, man, their quarterback done. Obviously, credit SDSU's defense. We know what they did, but just when you think about even Theo Day a couple of years ago, or some of the guys they had in the past years, it's a mess up in Cedar Falls right now, down in Cedar Falls right now. So, yeah, I kind of expected a good performance from SDSU, but I'm just still stunned that this is how far it's fallen for UNI.
Yeah, it is kind of sad to see overall, for the Valley and the strength of the conference. I think you saw a huge separation show up today across the board, looking at that Valley-wise. But when you beat UNI bad enough that Farley has kind of a meltdown in his post-game presser and talks about and calls it embarrassing, you did something right. And it's also crazy to me, the offense racked up almost 400 yards, and they were starting most of the game in phenomenal field position. So
and they probably took the rest of the game. They basically kind of took the rest of the game off after that third quarter. I mean, they kind of took the pedal off the gas a little bit, which you could do when you're up 41-3. So,
yeah,
imagine if they were really ticked off and wanted to just keep the train rolling. But well, we were talking more in the conference race, not so much the national race. Yeah, I mean, the Valley right now, the Valley is a 3-horse race. I think that was firmly came into picture today. We'll mention the other games, but yeah, I mean, I think the main thing that the offense is coming along, but this is definitely a defensive dominated team. I mean, they've just been, what is this now? I gotta look at the schedule here because I've got it up here. I've got my schedule. I mean, they've allowed 6 points in the last 3 games. Right. I mean, yeah, granted, one of those, I mean, you could argue the Division II team gave them a better game than the last 2 Division I teams in Augustana, who, by the way, got a nice win today. So good on them. But and they're going to be a ranked Division II team. So it's not as weird as that game was that you can at least say that, hey, you didn't play the Drex. But yeah, I mean, I think just the defense is on another clip. Yes. As we said, there's going to be tougher tests to come. But yeah, and we'll find out a lot about USD. I think, they're definitely going to be a playoff team at this point. I think we can kind of put that out of the side now. But they've got that. They got the Gaben Brookings, and then they really have a gauntlet at the end of the year where they got to go to where they host NDSU and they got to go to UND. And I know, again, I don't really think UND is. I said it right now. The Valley, as of now, is a 3-team race with NDSU, SDSU, and USD. But you still can't discount going to UND because they play so well up in that dome. And SDSU's got to go there too. So, not the dome, I guess the Alaris Center. But do I trust them on the road, especially with that offense? Maybe the rest of the Valley they can certainly win. But I mean, yeah, they just it's going to be it's definitely a 3-horse race. But yeah, some of they held Northern Iowa to 66 yards rushing.
Yeah,
you think back to the Panther teams that used to have David Johnson and some of those battles. And again, I know I'm rambling a little there. Only 246 total yards today. What was that? I think 4 or 5 turnovers, and most of them came in the first half. And yes, somebody mentioned in there, it's the 4th straight year they're playing their rivalry games back to back. And I think South Dakota might have a bye before that. I think they have a bye the week that it's the Marker game. So
don't get me started on how the Valley has scheduled SDSU for the last half decade. It has been a joke. When SDSU was virtually the only team on bye and every other team starts the conference schedule, that tells you the Valley made SDSU one of the very few Valley teams that wasn't allowed to have a mid-season bye. Now, you can argue that it turned out to be good timing, blah, 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 but this is the 2nd or 3rd year that SDSU has not been allowed a bye in the middle of the season. They had to have it in the beginning. They had to have it at the very end, and they've consistently had to play their rivalry games back-to-back weeks, which is a horseshit joke. That's not by accident. After it happens that many times, it's not by accident. It's, we didn't know. No, you knew. That's not a surprise after the 4th time. You are trying to make things difficult through the schedule. And that bothers me, but it is what it is. That's not it. The Jacks have rose to the occasion with it plenty of times. It is what it is, but you're really going to find out about the South Dakota teams later in the year because SDSU has to play South Dakota, and then NDSU, then South Dakota, then I think it's Indiana State, but then it's at North Dakota. So those are, and the fact that it's at North Dakota is a huge deal.
Even we'll see what happens with this. Even the Southern Illinois game on the Senior Day game, I know what's happened to them, but they might have their quarterback back. I've kind of, when I was down in Vermillion last week for the SIU USD game, they were saying it'll probably be a month or so. But I don't know. Maybe if they get him back, maybe they're probably not going to be in the playoff mix right now. They lost.
That's going to make that game a potential to be a problem.
Yeah, that makes it's still a game you should win, but it makes it a little bit more difficult because today they were beat 45-10 at home by Illinois State. I was at the Dome last week for that game, and USD played extremely well, but the offense with the quarterback they have in there is just not what it was. So unless they have some turnaround or their original guy comes back and recovers very quickly, I don't think Southern Illinois could be that. And even Missouri State at the end of the year, they've played. They were off today, but Missouri State's played better than I think everybody expected them to after last year, and that's going to be in Springfield, and it's their last FCS game ever. That they would love nothing more than to make a statement going into the FBS against a team that a lot of people think should be probably going to the FBS instead of them. Different discussion for a different day there, but
right.
So it's definitely easy to kind of look ahead and check mark everything when you're just because right now this conference is dominated by the Dakotas, and it really has been for the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Whatever it is, really since UNI kind of fell off the table. But yeah, I think that it could get a little. There's some potential potholes, but this is not the SDSU program of 2021 or 2019. They don't seem to have these kind of games where they have that let up. It's whether it's just they have that much more talent than everybody, they're that much more physical, or they just are that much more locked in because they've now done it. They've won the championships. They got over the hump they couldn't get over for so long. we don't see the letdown games anymore. Not to say they couldn't happen again, but I think that that's it's hard to picture those losses, even though on paper you look and say, well, maybe this is a little difficult. You never know. But yeah, and the bye thing, I think Jimmy kind of addressed it at his, because I asked him about that during the weekly presser. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I did point out that I'm like, you've either had the bye at the very start of conference play or the 1 year where it was at the very end. I mean, I think he kind of shrugged it off. He's like, kind of the typical, well, not much we can really do. But I think he did make a point of saying that, maybe we made too much of that in the past. I think was something to the effect of what he said. And I think it probably did help him this time because they had a lot of injuries. I mean, they were playing a lot of backups at Southeast Louisiana 2 weeks ago, and obviously Angel Johnson comes back. He's healthy. They're still dealing with some injuries. One of their defensive backs is going to be out for the year, so it's not. But you're going to deal with injuries throughout the year. That's football. So, in this case, I think maybe having the bye here works.
Yep.
But yeah, it still would be nicer if they would spread it out a little bit, and like we continue to see over the last 2 years, for whatever reason, the team they're playing usually in these tough games is coming off a bye. I don't know when North Dakota State's. I think North Dakota State does play next week. They've got Southern Illinois, which I think that's what they've got next week, and that does not bode well for Southern Illinois. So unless the Salukis really have something cooking, that's not going to happen for them. So
yeah, Youngstown State, just looking ahead, has the opportunity to be a trap game twice because they play SDSU the week before the marker. Now it's Hobo Day, which could, in theory, raise the potential of it being a trap game just because of all the fanfare around Hobo Day and everything else. But then the next week, they play USD the week before USD plays in Brookings, which
and it's a road game. I think that might be even more dangerous because I think it's a road game for USD. So,
right.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe, don't quote me on that. It's a road game. So, that again, those are both very interesting traps that could. And I was wrong, by the way. USD doesn't have their bye before SDSU, so they're playing Youngstown, like you just said. So USD's bye is actually after they play the Jacks, so they'll play because then they'll host Indiana State, and then they finish with that, which will probably define their season in some form, whatever happens in Brookings, because they have Indiana State, which they'll take care of that, but then they go to Grand Forks. And they wrap up with North Dakota State at home in the final game. So, it's Sockalookies. I like that one.
The Sockalookies.
Yep,
that was an internet sensation. 2, maybe 3 years ago, and we haven't let it die here on Jackrabbit Illustrated. The Sockalookies Fear No Man has been a phrase on here for a couple of years, and it's not going to die because I love it. It's phenomenal.
Love it.
Yeah, no, but back to this game. Mark made some really good throws.
Yep.
Spread the ball around well. You got, Goring and Prajin in there getting touchdowns. That was really nice to see that spread around. Angel houses one. He does what we've seen and have been saying he's had the potential for the last year and a half. And get him the ball in space, and he'll pop it. And to tightrope the sidelines the way he did for that touchdown was impressive. I had a couple guys watching with me here who are not Jacks fans, who don't even really know who Northern Iowa are, and they're like, "Oh my God, he stayed in." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was wild. That was some athleticism." So,
and to the point about spreading it around, although some of this was Chase Mason because he went. He obviously had some time as the game got away, but 10 different Jackrabbits got receptions in this game. Nobody had more than 4 catches, and that was actually Amar who had the most catches. I mean, the stats aren't gonna, like the individual stats other than Gronowski aren't gonna wow you, but it's just kind of you look up and down, it's like, oh, that guy everybody had a pretty good hand in this game, and it's good to see Angel. Somebody was asking, I think I can't remember, wasn't during our last post game show, but it was during. I just heard it out there. I'm like, well, this Voorhees guy is going to break out. Is Angel going to get his carry? I'm like, yeah, he's gonna get touches too.
Yeah.
That might be the one challenge that they have to deal with is how do you get everybody? How do you keep feeding people and not keep them in a flow? Because I mean, it's a good problem to have, I mean, but
Right.
obviously, we'll see because they're going to be facing better defenses here coming up with the other Dakota schools that are going to challenge them in some way that UNI could not. Certainly that Southeast Louisiana and even Incarnate Word couldn't. So,
and we've seen around the valley this year, and plus just with Angel, how quick you can all of a sudden be at the bottom of your depth running back wise. And you make a good point though, keeping them in rhythm. I think that's important. That's something NDSU had gone away from the last couple, maybe 4 years, where they just we're giving 4 or 5 guys the ball. Felt like they weren't who they used to be because none of those guys got into a rhythm. I think that is important for running backs. So then I think you can tell the coaching staff does recognize that. They're not trying to get 4 or 5 guys the ball. It's 2, maybe 3, and that's the guys carrying the ball.
Still maybe kind of waiting for a breakout from the tight ends at this point, obviously. Yep. But again, this game got so out of hand, and some of that was also because you were getting – I mean, it was all 3 phases. You had defense, special team. That's probably the only thing that was missing was a defensive touchdown, honestly. Right. So I guess they slacked off on that regard. But no, still waiting kind of for the big breakout game from the tight ends. I would still put my money on that coming, and hopefully coming in a game that if you're a Jackrabbit fan, you're certainly hoping that's coming in the marker game, or if you're a Jackrabbit fan, you're hoping it's coming in the USD game, or all of them really. So, but yeah, I'm just again, this wasn't necessarily a stat stuffing game, and yeah, somebody mentioned the Obrowski pass. I didn't see that one, but I guess because I full disclosure, I was out running around and shooting about 3 different things, so I was kind of watching on my phone and keeping track of it. And certainly after it got that out of hand, I wasn't necessarily following it as close as I normally would. But did we like? Did they show much in terms of play? Anything tricky? I mean, was it pretty vanilla? Or, they didn't really have. I mean, in the end, they didn't really have to.
There was some decent amount of plays with Chase Mason on the field before he took over. I think you saw a fair amount of that. I wasn't as hyper focused as I'd like to be, just because I did have a bunch of company over, and then the baby on top of it. But yeah, I mean, you saw some different things. I think you saw more shown in that game, especially from the pass game front, than what we've seen outside of maybe like Incarnate Word in Oklahoma State. To me, I don't know. It's a big lesson here is if Jimmy says, I'm not worried about it, it's going to come around. It will come around. Like it's.
I think that kind of needs to be I don't even know if you need Jimmy to say that. I mean, what have we, that was my lead on my sportscast tonight when I'm introducing the highlights. I'm like, they were, because most people expected them to be 3-1. I mean, obviously there was the hope they would go out to Oklahoma State, but realistically, I don't think anybody was going to be disappointed if Oklahoma State was the only loss. So the minimum was 3-1. Reverse.
Yeah, they did do the flea flicker in the reverse. The flea flicker, you and I covered it well for being a flea flicker, but Mark kind of threw it to a spot that was just a little bit out of the reach. And in watching in the game, it looks like he overthrows who he's throwing to by 5 yards. And then all of a sudden, I think it was Wildy flies into view and is diving for the ball. It's one of those where the camera angle didn't show him racing across the back of the end zone. Felt just incomplete. But yeah, Mason did look good in the third quarter, slinging it around too. Then maybe he has a little more of a connection with those guys being young around their age. But I mean, I like this. What do you complain about in this game?
No, it's yeah. I mean, of course, and I brought up that because I'm like, obviously, there had been the play calling, and again, probably not. I'm not a super big expert of that, and I don't usually get to unless I see something really weird. I don't get on anybody's play calling very often. But yeah, I know people have. to me, again, there's a lot of, you want to see something, but there's a lot of echoes really of what happened when Lujan took over after Eck in terms of the way that non-conference went. And then the offense kind of, they figured their thing out. They figured it out with him. You got a new position coaches. I mean, there was a lot of turnover on this staff. So it's not, again, another reason why I said it across the board. I said it last week at the USD game because I didn't think they had an overly impressive non-conference, but everything is different when you get to this point. When teams know each other, and when these are, Jimmy said it kind of I haven't heard his remarks after this game, but he can go full on Eck on the drill. I don't know if anyone can go full Eck if you don't have Eck, but
right.
But no, I think Jimmy said. I mean, his attitude was that game's a playoff game in this conference. And to be frank, I don't know how many bids it's going to get because I think while the top end is very top endy, if that's a word, it's kind of a mess beyond the quotas right now.
If you look nationally, it's a mess. I mean, we had some huge upsets, not to skip over the rest of the Valley and everything.
Yeah.
Montana loses to Weber, who looked like they shouldn't have been ranked, and they were at home, and they lose. I think they're at home.
I know it went to overtime, but 55.
Right. And then Davis only squeaks by Portland State by 1 point after upsetting Idaho. That was
Portland State coughed it up.
Yep.
I think that was their first home game, wasn't it?
Yes, that was their first.
Yeah. Yep. I'd seen Davis was trailing for a lot of that game, and that's
then Central Arkansas, who a lot of people blue blood. We're talking about maybe a semifinal, national final, maybe even a championship team. Central Arkansas, who's getting a lot of love, ends up losing 41-34 to Abilene Christian.
Fairly good team. I don't think they got a.
Tarleton just escapes Southern Utah because Southern Utah misses an extra.
Your Mountain West member.
Right. Yeah, Tarleton State, and it's been talked about. They just escaped there. I mean, there was a lot of CAA had some upsets as well. William and Mary, who was ranked, goes down to who they lose to.
I got the board up here. They lost to Towson. Towson,
yeah.
I'm not too. I thought Towson made a good accounting of themselves in Fargo a few weeks ago. I mean, they got down, but they made the buy. I mean, again, non-conference. Same thing applies. You can't really, they can be weird and they don't necessarily. But Towson to come back and get within a touchdown in the Fargo Dome on NDSU's homecoming, So you got to give the CA, that team. I think you got to give East Tennessee State's been great. When we thought we kind of wondered, well, after that NDSU heartbreaker, were they going to be able to pull themselves together? And they have.
Yeah. I mean, and Furman just barely squeaks by the Citadel. I mean, yeah. And then ETSU, they lose to Chattanooga this week. I'm
pumping their tires. Of course, and that was a weird. Was that the game that nobody was allowed to be at because of all the? There was one game was it
was at ETSU, and so I think I'd consider giving them a pass just because of.
I think it was West Carolina and Wofford that didn't play in front of anybody.
Yeah, and ETSU, the stuff
they had last week,
last week that was a lot to go through. They're still dealing with all that going on around them from the flooding and hurricane and everything. And hope everybody's doing fine down there. If you're listening down south for some reason, but yeah, I mean, like Ron Lowning points out, 10 of the top 25 lots this week. That is, if you were a voter hoping things would clear itself up, oof. That's.
I don't have the vote in. I'm glad I'm not. For once, I'm glad I'm not getting a vote in that poll because. That would be a bloodbath.
It's tough. I've voted in during weeks like that, and you do your ballot so many times and you look at it and you hate it. So then you go back through the spreadsheet with all the games, with game stories and recaps and all that, and you go back through and do it all over again. And then you hate it again, and so you go back. Oh, why do I have? I did that, and you end up eventually just getting frustrated and sending it in sometimes. And you look at that, like some of these teams, like Idaho. I don't think their actual starting quarterback, because they're on their third or fourth
They're
string
on their
guy
third
now.
string guy.
Yeah, I think their
And
starting
technically,
quarterback is slated to probably come back for the playoffs. So, I mean, that makes them a whole different team.
Yeah, although you have to wonder by that. I mean, is he going to need a week or two? I mean, that I don't know. I think they have to hope they get him in before that, because it would
realistically, if they come back in the playoffs, if they keep
playing
like they are, they might have a bye, or they will, because they're seeding the top 16. You're probably going to get an easier first round matchup that he does get to have a tune-up game in to be ready before the second round. So I do think they could be very dangerous once he comes back.
Yeah, I would not. Somebody said that Montana. I mean, and I think Montana State plays Idaho here next week or in 2 weeks. I know. I had this. I remember Craig Haley is kind of already started, and there's been some rumblings of this, and it could happen. I don't know. I think there's a pretty Georgia and Texas the week of the marker game might get. But I saw a lot of people probably saw the Craig Haley tweet about how, hey, maybe game day goes to Fargo for 1 versus 2, which doesn't happen all that much, although it's been happening. This will be the set if those teams win, which assuming they do win next week, it'll be 1 versus 2. It'll be the second time in 3 years it's been 1 versus 2 there, so it's becoming a little customary, but yeah, I think. But yeah, I
feel like with how loud Ron is for Montana State, they're due for an upset. And if they get upset by Idaho, Ron, oh, buddy, I've seen how many podcasts you're running around commenting on. You are gonna wear
that game's on ESPN too.
Yes,
that'll be going about the time. That'll probably be on the TV up here. It'll be 9:15 start our time, right. So we'll be able to live. If they are losing, and yeah, I mean, but I mentioned this too. I mean, like in theory, if everybody keeps winning, which is not, that's not a given, but let's say, the ideal scenario for our audience, SDSU wins in Fargo, USD wins out. You could have another 1 versus 2 game the following week if Montana State goes out and loses to Idaho, because they could. I mean, if NDSU and Montana State lose in the next 2 weeks, and SDSU and USC keep winning, you could have back-to-back 1 versus 2 matchups in the FCS. And again, I've said that with the game in Fargo being on an ESPN network, and we still don't have it, it's kind of messing with us because we're trying to figure out how we're going to get somebody up there. But we still don't have the kickoff time yet, so we're waiting for that. But with that game being televised, and with the State U game and Brookings being televised, the possibilities of game day are there. We know they legitimately had kind of reserved rooms in Vermilion, so they were considering that game a year ago. They've been to Fargo a lot, so yeah, I think there's, if everybody keeps taking care of business, and again, we'll stoke those fires when we get into that week. Let's say, as Jimmy would say, let's go 1-0 for SDSU, and certainly, but yeah, I mean, I think that marker week is Georgia versus Texas. So
yeah,
I mean, they did do a Georgia-Bama game, but and now the Alabama-Tennessee game lost a lot of lust. Alabama-Tennessee's that way as well.
Is it at Texas or at Georgia?
Well, I got my schedule. I got my handy-dandy schedule because I'm flipping through.
If it's at Texas, I would wager they go there just because they get to do Archie Manning and everything else.
But even when they did game day, it was in Bama. So I mean,
right.
If they go, if it's in Georgia, I mean, yeah. And then the following week, when you have SDSU USD, that schedule is I think it is in Texas. So I'd say and Texas is going to be. Obviously we'll see what happens next week, but with Alabama losing tonight, they're going to be number 1 in the country. Georgia probably boosts up, so you could be. I don't think you'll have it, but maybe you potentially have 1 versus 2 in both the FBS and FCS. A lot would have to happen, I think, on the FBS side to get Georgia back up to 2. But I mean, Tennessee and Alabama both lost tonight, so they could be 3 by the time that poll comes out this week. I mean, you could that would be pretty wild. I know the big boys don't pay attention to the FCS rankings at all, and they don't include them in anything. But to have 1 versus 2 in both divisions would be crazy on the same weekend. And the game being on ESPN, that I think that increases the possibility it's on game day. And,
but you're going against Texas.
You're going against a lot of good
SEC, which is definitely going to be the showcase game for SEC/ESPN.
I don't remember the guy's name, but they had a producer who was really instrumental. I don't remember his name, but he got laid off during one of their rounds of layoffs, and he was always kind of the guy who would really push them to go to an FCS game. And I don't think they went to an FCS or a lower. I don't think they went to a lower division last year for game day.
Yeah, they were at Montana State 2 years ago.
Yep. But it used to be, Lee Fitting. There you go. Thanks, Seth.
Yep.
Lee Fitting. I knew that was who it was. He got let go. I think he was actually a James Madison alum. So, kind of he had that, little extra kick to push them there. But, I mean, that was another reason I thought last year there was a very good chance we would see SDSU and USD, because they usually go somewhere, like almost every year they go somewhere smaller.
Yep.
And last year they didn't. So that's another sign to me that him being gone probably does not help those causes. Now, the following week, if everything plays through, everybody keeps winning, it's a little murkier that following week because there's not, and again, you have to obviously wait to see how the rest of the top 25 shakes out. But like the best game in FBS that week is maybe they're not going to go to Missouri and Alabama. Texas gets to go to Vanderbilt, so maybe history repeats itself.
Right.
You never know. Maybe it's Nebraska and Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State will probably be unbeaten. Maybe Nebraska's only got the 1 loss and is back in the rankings. I don't think Oregon's going to get it. I mean, there's just LSU and Texas A&M aren't Oklahoma and Ole Miss. They're kind of middle-ranked teams. I don't know if that's, they could. You got Kansas and Kansas State, but Kansas is cratered. The week of the SDSU USD game, and I'm not. Of course, I would rather it be in Brookings and the game day be in South Dakota than North Dakota, and I think as everybody would. But legitimately, if you're looking at who the games they have to go against, the week of SDSU USD has a lighter competition, but you have NDSU and you have SDSU. Those are the biggest FCS brands. It'll be interesting. We'll see, and it'll probably end up being nothing, and it'll probably end up becoming not happening. We'll talk a decent amount about it,
right,
and it won't happen. But it's fun. It's fun. It's fun to talk about.
Right, for sure. And quick, before we get into the rest of that, we do have to thank our other segment sponsor, Cubby Sports Bar and Grill, Brookings, South Dakota, downtown Brookings. Sure. The best place to watch a game. Hopefully you were able to watch the game there today. They've got a ton of good specials. Hobo Day coming up. They are going to have a kegs of eggs.
Get out the volleyball and then go to Cubby's. I mean, you got a brand. Right. I went to the new facility. And did they win tonight? I haven't seen the score yet. Question. I need to update my scoreboard too.
I've been on top of it too, and I didn't check today yet.
They had a tough one tonight. I think it was St. Thomas because St. Thomas went down to USD and swept them. So they're obviously the volleyball program for the Tommies is coming along like the basketball program. So
I don't see anything posted. Did they have a game tonight?
I thought they did. I'm on STSU sites. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they didn't have I don't know. The Summit League schedule's kind of weird. And incidentally, they have Summit League basketball. Oh, I guess they didn't play tonight. Instinctively, I think whoever plays because I think USD played Kansas City tonight. I just would have thought, usually instinctively in those things, I think whoever plays on Thursday is going to come up here, and whoever plays Thursday in Brookings is going to go down there. Obviously, that did not happen. But go to Cubbies. Go to a volleyball match. You're gonna be going for basketball, I know, but go check in at the new arena. It's pretty nice. they've done a pretty good job of it's the layout to me is pretty much still is very similar. You still have the one end that's almost exactly the same, but you can tell the differences. And somebody mentioned to me too, I still think they're kind of finishing it a little bit in places, but it's very it's a world of difference. I was pretty impressed, and it's pretty nice that we've essentially brought now all of South Dakota into the modern age with these arenas. I mean, nobody really plays and not that Frost was bad. I love the original Frost too. But this one has all the bells and whistles and a lot of club stuff and way more concessions. More so on the south side. The north side's still a little. The north side of that, which is connected to the HPR, is still kind of the same.
The hyper,
hyper. I think that's. But quick little sidebar from football. Yeah, especially the volleyball team is having a heck of a year, and that obviously they had 2,800, more than 2,800 for the last match. And that's also getting you that gets you excited for basketball season too, because especially when you get the rivals in there with the games with NDSU and USD, that place for men and women is just going to be. I'm still curious to see how loud it's going to get, because I
would say, how was the atmosphere? Just judging off of 2,800 for volleyball for our program.
I like the atmosphere. It wasn't the same. You could tell it's not the same as playing a rival. I mean, as much as people were hyped to be in there, they didn't have the same engagement as if it were South Dakota or North Dakota State. So I'll be curious, because they'll be playing. I mean, they haven't beaten volleyball. They haven't beaten USD in something like 10 years. I mean, it's been like 18 straight matches. So they play them up there in a few weeks, and that should be, I would imagine that's going to have a lot of people. But I love the atmosphere. I think the student section. I know you'd mentioned that student club. That's pretty cool. What I like about it is it comes down farther to the floor now. You don't, as much as I kind of like that weird rise thing
I loved that rise and how high, and it felt like they were right on the court to me from it. And I was bummed that it's gone, but I haven't said anything because I got to see it in person. See how I like the vibe.
I will say the way the student section rises up, it's very steep. It feels like there's a lot of people on top of you again. And then the band's right there. And the way of course they've now switched where the bench, and I think it'll be this way for basketball too, but the benches are now on the other end of the court. But the visiting bench for volleyball, at least, was right next to the student section and the band, and they're closer in that setup than they were in the old. So I can imagine how much that's probably going to please Dave Richmond if he has to be screaming through the band playing during his timeouts. So it's going to be like I said, the basketball is, and again, the volleyball is having a tremendous season. Go out and watch it. But I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the big rivalry games for basketball in there. And the atmosphere was always great at Frost, and this will be. But I didn't get. I mean, it seemed loud, but there's a different loud when you're playing a game when it's a team that you're playing against that people are invested in. So I think maybe I'll kind of get an idea of that. I don't think I actually won't be working the night they play USD, but maybe the USD match in a few weeks gives us a little idea of how loud it gets in there, because I'm assuming that'll have although I'm sure there'll be a lot of people from Vermillion coming up too if they can get a ticket, but that might give us a pretty good idea of how loud it's going to get, because that will be a match that's going to be for volleyball, is going to be pretty hotly contested.
I want to see if it can get as loud as American Family Field did for the Brewers. It was so loud before our souls got snatched from our bodies.
I wasn't going to say
loud before that
you're going there.
The beat writers were putting earplugs in because it was so loud in that place before it wasn't. So if it gets that loud, that'd be sick. But
and by the way, I had been wondering this, but the first basketball games, for those who are wondering, I know we'll get back to our football here. We'll probably wrap up pretty soon. But the first official basketball games, not counting the exhibitions. The first new games in the new arena, this is going to be a pretty sweet doubleheader. I haven't looked too much at the schedule, but hopefully there are a decent amount of. It would be nice if we got back to doubleheaders a little bit more in the Summit League, especially when it's NDSU and USD. Come on, they don't need to be at the same time.
Yep.
I think they've at least maybe gotten a little away from that, and they play on. But yeah, the first home games for basketball will be on Friday. That's also high school football playoffs. Oh, that's not great. But the first home game for the women will be Friday, November 8th at 6:00 against Creighton. And then the men follow against Long Beach State. And that's, again, it's a challenge unfortunately for the men, it's a challenge bringing teams up here, just the way it is in the Summit League. And there are certainly the share of NAIA games and, ones that are probably not going to be, but there is a lot more to do with the arena now with the clubs and everything they put in. And, but, getting Creighton and Long Beach, those are one's technically a major, obviously, in Creighton, who's been ranked and had great tournament success. And Long Beach State's been a program that has been good over the years. They've been, I believe they're still in the Big West or West Coast Conference. One of the, with realignment, my brain is scrambled. Twins fans.
Yeah, Twins fans, you have no sympathy from me. You have none whatsoever, because good friend Dallas Clark Sheen text the group about how he's in a meeting with Minnesota people who were talking, and we're not rivals in baseball. We're not. But then these Minnesotans are like, oh, it feels good to see Wisconsin have more sports pain. That's the best. So, and you have a World Series already. So go cry in your World Series trophy that you've got to experience in your lifetime. Yeah, 2 of them. And I will continue.
Well, they have paid the price. Nobody else has won anything in 30 years.
And if you want to hear this, you want to genuinely be sports sad, look up Bob Uecker's call of the end of that game. Genuinely, as a Brewers fan, like I don't necessarily want to see a World Series for me. I want to see it for Bob Uecker. But that's enough baseball.
Did he call the 81 one? Was he there in 81?
He called it, but we didn't win.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's you want to see him call a winning one, because I thought he had called although back then he was a little younger, so he's
way young. Well, he's 90 years old now, and
he still looks pretty good for 90, man.
He does incredible for 90. And he still goes down to parties with
Jimmy Carter went around, and like that's kind of God bless him for still being alive, but that would kind of be the nightmare for a lot of people.
Yeah,
in their old age. I guess like I said, we wrapped up the Jackrabbits. We'll wrap kind of looking around the rest of the league. I guess obviously the other big game, it was the game of the day in the Valley, was the battle for North Dakota, formerly the battle for the nickel. I don't know why they play for it. I think we both did, didn't we? That we thought North Dakota State was just going to probably roll them, and that was essentially it. I think UND got back within a touchdown in the second, but it was never really. That was 41-17. I mean,
and they didn't play with Cam Miller for a while because he got hurt.
Now, how bad is that
injury?
Out
for the last game. They don't know. They said heavily taped and ice.
Saw that from Izzo. Yeah, I mean, I hope he's okay, because I mean, as much as we want to see the teams from down here beat them. He's been playing at such an elite level that you don't want to see that. I mean, he's probably
ever want to beat them when they have injured players, because
that doesn't feel as
you
legit.
Want to beat them at your best. You don't want to hear from Cam Miller, whatever. No, I want you at your best when we beat you. It's more fun that way. So give me that. And Dan, I don't care about Minnesota sports fandom. You earn everything you get.
You get. I didn't want to bring up the Vikings Packers. If we stay up all night, we can be here when the Vikings and Aaron Rodgers
when the Vikings start. Yeah,
8:30 in the morning in London. But yeah, Polisek said after the game he could have gone back in, but didn't need to. Okay, we'll see if it's an issue. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the injury was. I didn't see it. If he just rolled an ankle, that's not going to be anything. If it's a sprain. Maybe it's something that's, we'll see.
Well,
the worst part about that would have been
next week.
Yeah, the worst part was that the game was over at that point. I mean, they were up 38. I think they were up 31 or 38. Like, that's the last thing you want to see is a starter get injured that late in the game when the matter's decided. So, yeah, but no, this was closest it was. North Dakota got within 7. early in the second quarter, and then it was just pretty much
So my
bloodletting.
favorite part of that game, I called it with you, we called it together, and then all week on our betting show, I called it. UND had never been closer than 21 points in the Division One era in the Fargo Dome, and so that was my lock of the century pick. And then Ben thought that our co-host on the B team thought that UND was going to be closer, and the line came out at 13.5, and he asked me if I wanted to bet him $20 on it. I said absolutely, and he paid me before halftime.
And mine, yeah, good call there. No, I don't look as good for this because I forgot to post it going into the game, but after they scored their first touchdown, I quoted one of their guys, and I said, yeah, I don't think this is going to be a game, guys. You're right, the Fargo Dome thing, I mean, that's an issue. They in general, they've not played well on the road at all. I mean, they played very good. That's why I'm saying for SDSU and USD, even though today aside, you can't look past that because they do play so well in the Alerus Center. I mean, we saw what they did to the Bison a year ago up there, and they almost beat them, the Bison's national title team in 2021. If they'd had better quarterback play, they would have beaten NDSU in 2021 at the Alerus Center. So you can't look past that because you have to go there. But they've never played well on the road. I remember last year when they beat the Bison, and yeah, there's a bit of a hangover. I mean, shoot, the coach was crying after they beat NDSU a year ago. Bubba was. Mm-hmm. But I think they went right on the road the following week and got just laid a total egg. It was either Northern Iowa or some Illinois state, somebody they should have really, I get maybe having a bit of a hangover, but that's like blackout drunk. You don't have your pants and you're trying to find out where you are. Like that's more than a hangover.
The FCS Fans Nation guys, Matt Frazee went through and looked it up, and I think he did since 2020, like the last 4 years of UND. And at home, they were 23-3, and with only 3 losses and a bunch of wins over ranked teams. And then they only had 6 wins on the road, which is an absurd split. It's harder to win on the road in college football. Absolutely. Yeah. Markedly.
The Jacks found that out for a long time too.
Yeah, but that split is insane. That is crazy. They can't win on the road at all.
Well, and then the other half of it to me, and I've harped on this with them, the way their offense is. I know they had the big comeback against Montana, although as we saw today, Montana maybe is not a terrific defensive team. With the way their offense is now, they just don't have a passing game. I mean, Bo Belquist is one of the top receivers in this conference in the FCS, but they can't really get him the ball. The quarterback they have, Romfo. I mean, I know he had a good day against Murray State, but spoiler alert, everyone's going to have a good day against Murray State at this pace. They just don't have a passing game. So especially when you're on the road and you're in the Fargo Dome and you're playing against a team that is now more invested in this game probably than ever before because of what happened a year ago. If you get down with that kind of a team and I realize they came back against Montana, but that was also in the Alerus Center. So, I mean, typically if you have a team that's that one-dimensional and that reliant on the run, and if you don't have a passing game, it's not going to go well for you if you get down. And if you can't chase points when you're a running team that's going to run clock. Right. So, yeah, I mean, Meyer, Seth, I mean, I saw they were running the ball well. I'm looking at the stat line there. I mean, their offensive line has been better than expected, especially considering they lost some transfers, including one to SDSU. I mean, Gavin Zebarth is a tough dude. He only had 65 yards today, but against the Bison, he went for 200 and some last year, I think. They actually they had a little more of a passing game than what you would think. They go 18-23 for 166, but it's nothing. It's just nothing that's super. It's nothing you can really get into a game with. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little surprised. I mean, but it's winning for them, and if they can get ahead of a team and if they're playing at home, then yeah, I mean, I'll be curious to see how they match up with SDSU and USD. But this is, they've got a lot of. I'm not sold on them. I got it in my header down here. It's a 3-team race. I'm not saying they couldn't still potentially beat somebody, whether it's South Dakota or South Dakota State, because they're going to have them up there. And they're not going to, they're going to make the playoffs unless they just, threw everything into today and decide to not show up the rest of the way. But they're going to make the playoffs, but I never really considered them a contender for the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know the two who are going to be at the top. We know South Dakota is a team that is threatening. Those three I felt really good about. UND, I'm sorry, I don't. I've never seen it. In Montana, getting a big win over Montana was great, but it's not the same as doing it in conference. Conference is a different beast.
Bring up USD. USD is fascinating to me because they haven't really played anybody yet. I mean, Southern Illinois is ranked.
Although decent
we've seen without,
yeah,
but you don't learn a ton. They played well against Wisconsin. Southern Illinois we've seen is not the same team without their quarterback. They just got hammered by Illinois State at home to a similar score. But the interesting to me is what happens after the Youngstown State game, because they have 3 games because they'll be at UND. UND is, as we know, incredibly tough on the road. They might be fighting for their playoff lives or seeding lives at that point. You got to go to Brookings. You haven't won there since the year 2000, and you've got NDSU coming in with a point to prove still after last year for the last game of the year. They could be anywhere from a top 4 seed with that schedule and all the way down. You could drop down to 12. If you drop those 3 games, and I think they're all realistic. I think it's realistic for them to win all 3. I think it's realistic for them to lose all 3.
I think if you win 2 out of those 3, you're a top 4 seed, legitimately.
Probably, yeah.
Unless they trip up and lose somewhere else, they're a top 4 seed. I mean, you could even be knocking on the door of a top 2, depending on whatever's going on with Montana State. If Montana State runs the table, they're going to be a 2. I don't really see any, especially with an FB. Even though it's a crappy FBS team, they've got an FBS win. They're a pedigree. If they run the table, but, I still don't. You can't guarantee they're going to run the table. They still got to play Idaho. They still got to play I don't care how bad the Grizz look. We saw them look like crap last year, and they turned it on. Yep. And in that rivalry game, you never know what's going to happen when they play it. Which, by the way, you don't have to turn the rant clock on here. If we're going to have these rivalry games, end of the year. Not middle of October. Play the marker game. Play the USD game. Play them in the last 2. If you're going to play them back to back, especially, play them at the end of the season and have UND and NDSU playing, at the end of the season, whatever, a week or so after the marker game. Have all, as far as I'm concerned, have all the Dakota schools play at the end of the season and pump up the rivalry end of it. I don't know why this conference can't. There's no reason SDSU should be playing Southern Illinois, Missouri State. No disrespect to them, but they're not rivals. You want rivalry games that potentially decide your conference at the end. So, yeah, I think with USD, the 2 biggest differences I've seen, for one, I said a few weeks ago, I thought when they came back at Wisconsin and made that a game as badly as that started, that reminded me of the way things had gone against both SDSU and the playoff loss with NDSU. And they just didn't, once the snowball got rolling downhill for the Jackson Bison in those games, they could do nothing to stop it. Yep. And again, FBS game isn't a perfect analogy, but if you go to Camp Randall and the way that looked, it was going to be bad. And they go into the 4th quarter, they had a chance, so which was all that was respected. Now, I think the big thing I noticed this past week was just, and again, I realize taking aside that SIU has those issues, is their offensive line is playing much better. This is I said this when I saw them in preseason camp. They are bigger. They've got a little more depth. I don't know if they're quite at SDSU levels of depth yet or NDSU levels. That'll get tested. But their line is playing so much better. They're running the ball well. I mean, that if you really want to, you can tell they're more comfortable in what Josh Davis is running, and they've got a lot more weapons. Remember a year ago this time, Charles Pierre hadn't really emerged. They were still kind of trying to figure out if Nate Thomas was going to be the guy. Tice was getting a lot of carries, but I think he was maybe getting overused because they didn't really have that guy yet. Now you've got him and Pierre. How many times did we see that with the Jacks where you had the guy who was physical in Davis and strong, or it was Davis and Amar Johnson? They always had that two tandem thing where one was kind of the Thunder, the other was the Lightning. They've got kind of that developing, and I think somebody compared, the best comparison I heard Jimmy. I think Jimmy or someone compared our boy Kirby to Tice, the way he runs.
Yep.
So, but the receivers, we knew they had Bell and we knew they had Galbraith. They got a lot of other guys who were like, they got this Iowa State transfer, Adams, who was all of a sudden starting to light things up. I mean, they got more weapons, they got a line, and I think the fact that they've blown some games out, that's what we didn't see a year ago from them. Even except for Western Illinois, who is not, to me, is
you
not.
You blew out Drake, Murray State, and really banged up
Southern Illinois. It wasn't
SIU
one of those things.
sucks. They just got hammered at home.
But I think now I think they're kind of beat to the shit. Part of the reason they're beat to shit right now is they got beat to shit last week, even worse.
They were beat to shit before they played USD.
But I think the thing I've seen with them with USD more is I think they have the ability to actually come out and score points. Last year, that thing was carried entirely by the defense.
Yes.
They're, again, today with Murray State, not a good barometer. Just as, beating whatever's left of UNI, that's probably not a good barometer. But the eye test, when you see them, they're a different team. They look better than what they were a year ago. I think they're a little more legit. Even some Coyote fans kind of said that to me. That was what last week felt like. When was the last time they'd blown anybody out in what was considered a big game? Now I know SIU's fallen off the table, but last year Murray State kind of hung with them for a while. They couldn't really put away St. Thomas. All those games that were, I think 4 were decided by a touchdown or less. They're at the point right now where I don't really worry about them in any other games. Youngstown could be a trap, but
right.
Like last year, I think you could have seen them maybe losing to some of these teams. Kind of harder to see that happening now.
Right. Well, and I absolutely agree. I don't see them losing to Youngstown or to UNI or to Indiana State, because partially is those teams were supposed to be decent and they suck out loud, but also because USD does look like they are better. They've performed better on the road against bad teams when last year they didn't. I am still curious to see them go through the slate of the Dakotas before I'm truly sold. I'm very curious to see how they perform in Brookings. They have not performed well there.
Even if they lose that game, they need to be close. It needs to be close if they lose that game. It can't be another, 37-3 or
right.
They need to. I agree there. I mean that, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be that, and it's going to be national TV. That's going to be a test. Like they could lose that game and still, as long as it's respectable, and frankly, we could be seeing these matches again in the playoffs with the way the seeding is going to be. And, there's a very realistic chance whoever wins that game in Brookings could have home field advantage if, assuming they don't meet in Frisco. You could see them whoever wins the game in Brookings have home field if they're on the same side of a bracket. Same with NDSU. I mean, all those things. I do want to see that. Yeah, I definitely want to. I think they know it's going to get a lot tougher. Right? You don't have to. Nobody has. You don't want to get caught looking ahead, but there's no secrets right now where this is. the 2 weeks that are coming up, I don't want, you can't look past Hobo Day. I know how special that is for you guys, and and another bit of scheduling I'm not happy about is somehow the Hobo Day and USD's D days are all on the same day. I don't think I've seen that, scheduling wise for us people doesn't work particularly well that both of the homecoming event games are at the same time. Usually it feel like one was a week apart, but that's the Valley schedule this year. But certainly you don't want to look past those homecoming games and Hobo Day means here, but the 2-week stretch with nationally televised games for SDSU, NDSU, SDSU, USD, and then even at the end of the year, me being a little more unbiased, that stretch where they have to go up to Grand Forks and then play the Bison. Those are the 2 stretches that you're just like, man, that's like the playoff preview right there. I mean, that almost is a playoff in itself because, somebody is going to probably be coming away maybe with the number 1. Somebody out of that group is coming away as the number 1 or 2 seed in this. There's an inevitability to that, if somebody of those 3 schools goes, if somebody sweeps it, they're the number 1 seed, assuming they went out.
Right.
But it's hard to imagine if somebody goes 2-0, that they won't be at least the 1 or the 2 seed. That's the reality with it.
Yeah. The thing I know there's USD fans out there, and they're a good team now, and they've been a good team here for the last couple of years. You've got a dome that seats less than 10,000 people. How have they not sold it out yet?
I don't really know what's going on. I try not to. I mean, they'll sell it out.
And I know you're not going to say this. I will say it. They lie their ass off on what their attendance actually is. So when I see 6,000, I assume 5 at best, because I've seen it. I've seen too many of the live pictures compared to what they actually said. That's not right. It's tickets sold, which is fine, but don't say that's attendance and say tickets sold. That's just a personal gripe of mine. And I know this might be rich coming from an SDSU fan who we've had our attendance struggles, but we weren't having early season games with 6,000 fans.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually the attendance when the weather gets worse. Right. I was surprised by that. I kind of wanted to, and they'll sell out for D days because that's a homecoming.
I'd assume so. They've got a bunch of tickets left right now, but I'd assume
they should. If they don't sell out for that, I don't know. I mean, you've got pretty much a new athletic department. I think they're doing some decent promotions. I think they're trying some new things there. Whether it's going to take hold, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the deal is there. I mean, it's a different area. I mean, I don't know that Vermilion, I've heard some Coyote fans say that the city of Vermilion hasn't embraced the program the way Brookings has kind of rallied around it. I don't know if that plays a role. It's just it's kind of you're in a more, I don't know. I mean, it's obviously what they have. They're playing from behind, and the fact that SDSU was more successful, so that may that's going to take, that may never come back to them, or that it's going to take years to probably get back to that point, or at least a national title. I don't know. I mean, Idaho with 14K. But I mean, in general, although SDSU has been kind of the outlier. I mean, especially when you go back to the Division II days, I think they used to fill that dome. I mean, it's not like the fans weren't ever there. They had their run, they had their glory. I mean, granted, this is 40 years, but I even saw some older videos from the 90s, and I mean, it's like the fans were there. I know I'm on a Jackrabbit page, so people are going to bust on the dome, and I have my occasional gripe with it. I haven't seen that fly that constantly buzzes around me for a year or two, so maybe they killed that thing, but it's not like they aren't making upgrades. Like that newer end is pretty nice when you're on that side of it. Maybe that's something they need to do. I know they had a big donation from, I think, the Jones family, Scott Jones family. I think I even heard some rumor that maybe they were even playing around with somebody trying to do the way they have their club seating for the basketball arena, maybe try and do something down there if they renovate the other side, like we see with the Vikings and some of these NFL teams where you have like a club section on the field, which that would be actually pretty cool. And that would be if you're going to do that, I think that would be an innovative way to get people there.
I think part of first off, having been to the Cowboys field and having talked to people, done the tour of AT&T Stadium with those field level suites, they suck because you can't see because the players are in the way, and most of the people who have those suites go up to actual seats after like the intro and stuff because you can't see. Second off, I wonder if just the size of the Dakota Dome limits what you're able to do from this point forwards from a revenue standpoint if you're not already selling tickets. Because if you're let's go off of the attendance that they have 6,000, you have to assume they want it sold out, so they're not charging a high price for those tickets. They're not getting a premium dollar amount for those tickets. So if you're having to give away or do deals and promotions to get those tickets out there already, and you've already sunk, $20 million into it, are you going to be able to cover another $20-40 million worth of renovations if maybe you're having a hard time? I mean, looking at those attendance numbers, you'd have to imagine you're having a hard time covering that. People were wondering if SDSU was having a hard time covering the stadium payments when they were having games in the beginning of the season. It's still at 17,000 people. And that's 3 times what's showing up right now for them. So I wonder if that's an issue.
Although at least the dome's probably been paid off by now, at least in, like you said,
the whole dome itself, but I don't know if that renovation was a whole chunk of change that got set down for it, if it wasn't.
I don't know.
But that's neither here nor there. I was just curious if you had a take on that, because I genuinely, not being a dick, a team that is performing at the level they are for another year, you should draw at least 9,000 people. You don't have to worry about weather. You don't have to worry about anything.
Although sometimes, we've seen it different with SDSU. I remember this used to be a thing with the Bison before they got back to being what they were in the dynasty. But when there used to be a slogan, "Will you be there?" And the funniest thing I remember about the Bison was like, "Oh, they better not schedule a game on the pheasant opener weekend or the hunt." It was hunting. I think it was the pheasant opener.
That was us. That's us too. That happened.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, like,
I'm big on don't rag on attendance for other schools. If you're an SDSU fan, you shouldn't. You really shouldn't. We shouldn't. We should remember where we were 3-4 years ago.
And of course, the playoffs are still a bit of a hit or miss thing too.
Yeah, and the playoffs are still a problem, but dude, you got a 9,000 seat stadium. This isn't like, oh, you're only drawing 10, 12,000. It's like you've only got to sell 9,000 tickets. SDSU hasn't had a season where they've averaged less than 9,000 tickets. Boy, you got to go way back for that.
Well, part of it might too be the fact that they're good, but I remember, I think Matt Zimmer said this. You go back to that 2021 year for the Jacks where they were so up and down and chaotic. They'll get they'll lose that clunker to Southern Illinois, then they'll go beat the Bison, and they'll lose the Hail Mary game. And I remember he said after they lost the Hail Mary game, they came back the following week, and he was right. I was there for this too, but they come back the following week. It's North Dakota, and again, senior day can be kind of the end of the year can be kind of a hit or miss deal. I think students might have been on break too for Thanksgiving. I don't remember for certain on that, but the turnout for a game they needed to win to make the playoffs had gotten low, and Zimmer's thing was like, it's kind of the fans saying "F you" after the way they'd blown the USD game. It's like, people were, I kind of want, from the buy-in standpoint, that's why I said something about last week when they had that blowout win. I think their fans needed to see that because they haven't really seen a pure blowout like that in a long. To me, it was like the reverse of what had happened a few years ago when UNI went in there and it was the final game of that 2022 year. We thought Bob Nielsen was going to be fired after the game. I think maybe their fans need to see that. I think they need to see that blowout. But I think the other thing they're probably going to need to see is, frankly, they probably need to see them either beat SDSU or, beat NDSU again with their own eyes. I mean, I know they had to win over the Bison, but maybe it's just, they're kind of, like maybe you want to see that. Okay, you've talked about being a championship team. Now, show us it. Because that I agree with Zimmer when he said that about the North Dakota game. You don't want to invest in this team that's going to be up and down, and then just maybe they're still. I don't know. I don't know there's more to all these situations than I know than meets the eye. I do think if they could renovate the other side of the dome, that would matter because, not everybody goes to the game is a hardcore fan. You got to give people reasons to keep coming. And, as much as they control the weather, like I said, unless you're the dynasty program that's running through everybody and you're the hottest ticket in town, a day like today, or if the weather's nice, there are going to be people who are like, I'd rather be out, and you've got to find a way to make your product that product that people can't miss. And, it took SDSU a while to get there. It even took NDSU a while to get back there. So
I would argue that SDSU was there before they got there where they're at now.
They were
numbers. It's just numbers. Not filling a 9,000 seat stadium. The UNI today would have been overflowing the Dakota.
Oh, yeah.
And UNI has been on the decline fan base wise for a long time.
And they're different. They're right next to they're basically right next to Iowa City. They always have these 4:00 starts because they're trying to avoid playing at the same time as either Iowa or Iowa State. I think I'd be curious. I have to look it up. I don't know what Youngstown used to be. It is a little farther back, probably pre, SDSU, NDSU joining probably when it was the Gateway. Youngstown used to be one of the premier programs of the FCS or 1AA back when Jim Tressel was the head coach. So, and they play in a 21,000 seat stadium. I just don't know. We'll see. I certainly hope that maybe there's, we'll see what happens. They're likely going to have home games. They're certainly on track.
Last home game against Duquesne that they lost, they had 12,000 fans there.
Is there and again, we don't know how they count tickets,
Right.
I think that was a stadium. It's 21,000 for a reason. They used to basically fill the ice castle. They used to basically fill that place. I was going to say I should look up what Youngstown's number was today. I guess as we wrap up here, because it has been a quick hour 15, I'll say that, but especially for games that were pretty much just massacres. From the Dakota standpoint of things, but
8,202 today,
and obviously they haven't been off to a great start either. So it's I don't know, attendance. I'm tired of the attendance thing a little bit, and
No, I hear you. I'm just being a little bit of a dick, but also because there is part of me, because they will come out of the woodwork when the playoffs come and try to shit talk,
or if they win
the Jacks attendance, and it's like not even about right now. It's okay. Yeah, we had 6,000 fans in the cold in an unplanned game that is like the playoffs compared to at home. So I was just being a weenie a little bit about that.
Of course, they had the ticket thing with NDSU, the snafu with NDSU. I don't know. And of course, we always hear it. And of course, where does this always come from? It always comes from up north because they'll remind you of how great their crowds were in their playoff era when they were in their dynasty era. And I will remind them that you're in the most populous city in your state where you have 250,000 people around you. It shouldn't be that hard to minimum half fill that dome. Probably should be 12,000 minimum every week. And now they're obviously today was not. They had that sold out, and it will not be a problem, I'm sure, when SDSU's down there. But they've had it. Now they're bored with it. I'm like, well, whatever.
I'm for the Doze the Dome campaign, and they put up an outdoor stadium that seats 15,000, and I bet they get more people. That's what I.
Well, this is not me bagging on the dome. I don't like domes in general. I'd rather be at an outdoor stadium. Right. I worked up in Fargo, so I went to both of those, and I'm like, I get why, but I also saw some of the old videos of when they played at Memorial Stadium and Dakota Field. Like that. Some of the games where it was Sub-Zero didn't look, were like a reminder of what it was like. But I enjoyed the Montana. Now, granted, I got to go inside a lot, but I enjoy those. I just enjoy outdoor games, and the other half of it is Vermilion being farther south tends to be a little warmer too. So I don't, although granted last year we had that really bad blizzard as we were coming into the state U game, but Vermilion being a little far south tends to be a little warmer. An outdoor stadium would work there. I don't ever see the dome getting. Obviously, I don't ever see that actually happening unless somebody is unless there's a Patrick Mahomes who comes out of USD and then decides to donate $50 million or so. But obviously, because of the fact that dome is also a pretty big deal for track. I mean, they still use it for the indoor track stuff. The conference uses it a lot. So I could never see. But I do think they can get rid of that pool now because I think they built a new aquatic center in Vermilion. So I think that's maybe that's something they were waiting for to move. I don't know for certain on these things. I'm just kind of piecing together pieces in my own pea brain at this point. But they have a new aquatic center. I know that. So, that was obviously a complication beforehand was you had the pool underneath the what is the old grandstand now. You can probably do something with that now that pool is not if they can get rid of that pool. And now I think a lot of it used to be I think their entire athletic offices were housed in that dome. Now they've pretty much completely transferred over to the the Sanford Coyote Sports Center or the other side of the newer side, which is mostly the football offices now. Similar to what I saw at SDSU when I was at the new arena. There's some nice offices back where the old wrestling room used to be. So in Frost Arena, now there's office space for the basketball teams back there. Mm-hmm. So, and of course they have practice. And of course, both. That doesn't tell you how far we've come in the D1 era. Both of these schools have their own practice gyms. I mean, that's my. We'll wrap it up here because obviously I don't want to stray back into basketball, even though we love Summit League hoops and all that stuff around here. But my one gripe with both of these schools, but particularly SDSU, hang some banners for God's sake. It's like you would not know walking into that arena that they've won all these things. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe beforehand it might have been because of you had to pull down the old hoops when that was the practice when that also doubled as your practice facility. USD I don't really like. They at least have they kind of have like these. It wraps around the upper bowl of the arena because obviously their arena is like a pit basically. Right. But like the railings for the upper concourse, they have things that show their, what's happened, their conference titles, Sweet 16 run. I would rather it be a banner, although I think the way that arena is, it's kind of the ceiling's kind of low. It's pretty, again, being a pit. I don't know if they can hang it that way, but I'd rather they have banners, but at least they have something. I'm like, you have SDSU, I think you've won more Summit titles than any of the schools right now. You're one of only 2 schools in this league that has a Sweet 16. I mean, there aren't that many mid-majors, period, that go to the D1 Sweet 16s. You could even hang up the old national title banners from D2. Just make the place look like the damn Boston Garden used to. I hope, and I get they're expensive. I mean, but if they're
not that expensive grand scheme of things compared to.
Or you just, if you have a conference championship banner, just put the little year numbers on it, and then fill that up and then buy, you can put like 20 of them, I think, on those things. I wish although what they've done with the old floor and how they display their trophies now is pretty that's a pretty good flex. I will give them that. The fact that those trophies are, I won't spoil it too much, but if you go in there where they have this new display where they have the old Frost Arena floor, but the trophies have their own cases, and I'm like, I haven't seen that at the other. I don't think they have that at the Sports Center. I don't know about NDSU's arena because all I ever hear about that place are complaints one way or the other about the leg room. And the Betty is now, and I was never a big fan of the Betty, but that used to be the newest facility in the Dakotas. So to have their championship trophies all on display for the fans, and oh, by the way, your recruits, because that's as much of it as anything. Like if I want to bring my recruits in, and I want to, and I know their practice facility is also kind of adorned with stuff too. But just put it in even my alma mater, we put football banners in our gym. They're hanging from. It's just there's banners. Celebrate it. I want to see it on the court, not in the whole. It's great that they've made it unique, kind of ring around the arena, but banners. I want the banners.
Give Zach his banners. It's going to be a Twitter campaign.
Hey, they both. I asked them both to score a lot of points today in the first half, and they did. So they're obviously listening to me because it's all about me. Right. Everything is to please me. No,
absolutely.
I'll just last shout outs. By the way, just for the smaller colleges out there. Good on Augie. Got a win over Duluth with the last second touchdown. Big upset for Sioux Falls. They go to number 7 Mankato and win 40-36. So shout out to them, and shout out to Northern State, who upset a ranked team today up in Aberdeen, beat them 14-13. So I say this because I was mainly covering them with no D1 team, but as big of the blowouts were on D1, it was a pretty fun day to watch kind of the D2 stuff evolve because there were some big upsets and some fun stuff down there. So college football in this state is in really good shape. It was last year.
It is. Yes, absolutely.
Well, that'll do it for unless you got any other parting words. Obviously we've
got nothing.
Well, we'll be back. I will say, folks, kind of bear with us once we get after next week because we still don't, as I mentioned about an hour ago, we still don't know the kickoff time for NDSU. We still don't know the kickoff time for SDSU. I don't know how that's going to work. I might be going up to Fargo. I don't. That's going to be a pretty busy week. I'm hoping we get somebody up there, but bear with us for those 2 weeks because. Until we know what game time those are, those might be Sunday shows, depending on, if they play a late game. But we'll certainly be back next week. The Jacks play Youngstown State at 2:00 for Hobo Day. And we will be back next week. We did not plan for this one to go an hour and a half, but it did. So
no, that's the late night. That's the late night magic, baby. So
at least we didn't talk conference realignment.
Right. Oh, that would have gone for too long.
Thank God. Have a good one, everybody.
All right. Later.